Good day to you from Anagalactic on this Saturday, the 4th day of April 2026. Up here, I just have penned a letter from my teacher. I petitioned several sources of Islam scholarship for insight, that is, knowledge about Islam. This occurred just last year in 2025. Rather late in life, I would have to say, at the age of 70, to have literally discovered Islam. I really only knew of it as a word. But now, more than 12 months later, closer to 15 months later, having studied Islam and the Quran and the life of Muhammad, I must say, and every other aspect of Islam that I could find every day for about 15 months, I am now very comfortable with Islam, that I consider myself to be on the path of Islam, which is quite, I don't really know if I've fully assimilated what's been happening to me because I'm very busy. I'm quite active and very grateful to Allah for that. I believe that is something even a non-believer will appreciate when a believer expresses gratitude toward his God, even though you may not be totally on the same page as far as there being any such God, which I think is the essence of human commerce. Just be kind. That is what the Dalai Lama said, which I thought was just one of the most remarkable statements I ever heard from a religious figure. I really like the Dalai Lama. My sister actually knows him, which I still find remarkable. My small family of siblings, one of my siblings knows the Dalai Lama, and I really like this guy. And one of the reasons I really love this guy, it's not only because he endorsed David Bohm's book and said that David Bohm was his science guru. I just think it's just a remarkable relationship that David Bohm found with the Dalai Lama. And he also had an incredibly long and prosperous relationship with Krishnamurti, whom I swear, I'm not kidding you, I feel like after having done some research, because he collaborated with David Bohm, I listened to a lot of videos, varying, because that was quite a long time ago. It was just black and white stuff mostly. But I did quite a study of David Bohm recently, and of course, who would not envy me having done that? That was quite a prosperous journey. But really, the Dalai Lama said, "My religion is kindness." Isn't that just the most beautiful thing in its own way? It's like a limerick or just a one-line saying that just encompasses paragraphs and maybe whole books and volumes of just beauty. Just, my religion is kindness. If just any Joe said that, I would still be impressed, I hope, or pray. I'll never know now because I know who said that. It was the Dalai Lama. So this is one of my teachers, a letter that I got, and I'm just going to take a look at this to get the date. Yes, it was late September in 2025 that I petitioned this guy for his newsletter to people who wanted to learn more about Islam, and he's been sending me regular newsletters. But this was his first one. And the reason I'm showing this to you, because I consider it nothing less than a sign. In my own small world, you certainly don't need to credit. This is definitely a subjective point of view. But I literally couldn't believe what I was reading. It is so good. And so I'm going to take you on a little journey with me, and I really think you're going to appreciate. Again, this isn't a call to Islam or, come to Jesus time is how we say it crudely in America. I don't do that. I never really have. They're like, oh, come over to my way of thinking. No, but we are supposed to be good influences on each other. We're supposed to be helping each other. I know that may sound a little naive, but I don't think anybody would go, oh, gee, you're really in trouble with that attitude. Oh, you just want to be nice and help people. I don't know how you're going to survive. No, although, I mean, it does cross everybody's mind. Well, boy, you're in for a ride. So you're not going to be greedy. You just want to be generous. Well, good luck with that. But, I don't want to sound like a scoffer. It's just, I used to give out money pretty freely, called alms in Islam. It's one of the pillars of Islam, is to give to the poor. But, you see, it's like Ralph Waldo Emerson said, not all of us country folk have just stockpiles of bullion. It's just, there's 50 homeless people downtown who are just shivering and cold and lonely and tired and angry and whatever else they might be. Well, let's feed them all. Well, I'll tell you what, that is kind of, I mean, but who can do that? Some people go out of their way and they feed the homeless. I've seen them. I've talked with them. They're very happy, admirable, stable, but they do this, oh no, I do this just because, I'm a citizen and I feel like helping people. And then you find out they have some spiritual background. Well, I believe in the unity of all life and that we are here as good karma. Just everyone has a different way of saying the same thing. It makes me feel good to help others. Well, Jesus is on your side, son. I mean, I can only look up to that. Oh, Islam is real big into that. By the way, so are the Mormons. I've always had high respect for the Mormons. Never the leaders. I don't like the leaders in any church. If you're a leader in a church, I probably count on me just mistrusting you. But, like I said, I'm a proselyte of Islam now, and let's hope I can change before I die. You know what I mean? Isn't that the whole idea? Just get better. Well, here's a story I think you're going to like, and it's going to lead us into a short reading in the Quran. I'm so sorry, but I don't eat. As I'm always working, and I'm always happy working, but then all of a sudden, I don't remember when it was that the last time that I ate, and suddenly I'm just like near panic. I don't panic, and I recommend that you make sure you don't ever panic. But I'm just saying that metaphorically. It's like, God, I have got to eat something. And then, I don't know, I'm like a crazed animal. I'm supposed to be giving a lecture and I'm chewing on, well, I won't tell you what it is, but it's really good. But you don't need to know that. It's tuna with pickles. Like, what are you, pregnant? No, I don't know. Pregnant with ideas, that's right. I've heard this. I believe I've heard enough of the rumor mill to kind of credit this because I hear it so much. It's almost anecdotal that pregnant women will get a craving for a certain food that's just overpowering. And it may be something exotic like, by George, I really could use a breadfruit or something like that. Gosh, I just have to have some soft-shelled crabs right now. I don't understand, but my body tells me. Well, gee, I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact. I think I just had one of those light bulb moments, those aha moments. Oh, I'll bet I can guess why Mrs. Expectancy is having sudden cravings for exotic foods. Could it be just a guess that a life is growing inside you? Your body is like, we're going to need some extra chromium right away. alert, alert the hunger center to send out signals for something answering this description. Hey, what has strontium in it? Well, we don't want that, but need some traces of molybdenum for this thing growing in her womb. I don't know. Everyone dreams of being a script writer at some time. This is for a serial. What goes on inside mommy? It would probably get out of control. There'd be some pornographic version. And then I'd be sued because it was my idea that got out of hand. So, I'm just going to read this. But I want to put you in the mood. And at this time, I was looking around. I even went to the local, I guess I wouldn't call it a mosque, because it's just a square building like everything else in Chico. But it was where they met for prayer. And I found their email address, and I emailed them and said, yeah, I'd really love... I like what you said, that you welcome visitors, and boy, oh boy, would just like to, come see you, talk, just rap, or I don't know. Because I don't think I'm ready to go pray with them, because they actually go through a real process when they pray. It's not just you just come in and sit down and, start snoring. Like at a church. So this is the first letter that I got from Hamza. Hamza is his name. He's a teacher of Islam. So it's exactly what I wanted. He sent me this newsletter. And this is the first one he sent me, so I was quite excited to read this. Allah, Most High, swears by the stars that there is absolutely no doubt that he is the one who has revealed the miraculously eloquent Quran. But the interesting thing is that he doesn't just swear by the stars. Instead, he swears by the Mawaqi, the falling places of the stars. I just find it so remarkable that I had just started reading the Quran. And so he makes a reference to the Quran, Surah 56, which is about halfway through the 114, basically small chapters of the Quran. It's not a long book, but it is substantial. One does not usually read it in one sitting. But what I wanted to focus your attention on for a moment, because this is really important in understanding Islam, is to understand how they regard the Quran. And I'm a Bible scholar, so I sympathize with all of this, but I think this is information everybody should have. It doesn't make any difference what your opinion is about religion. You should at least know your environment. And I'm speaking to myself because I wasn't until 70 years old that I found out about this at all. So don't think I'm preaching down to you. I'm really talking to myself. I still can't believe what happened. It happened so fast. But after I was 70 years old, I should have been studying this in high school. And I went through a period of rather bitter recriminations, abstractly. It's not like I got really excited, but definitely felt some negative emotions of having been let down in my education. Because I knew nothing of Islam, the Quran, or Muhammad until I was 70 years old. That's absolutely unforgivable. That's a criminal negligence on the part of my culture. I showed by the age of 17 it was obvious that I'm a man of the cloth. I was going to be studying scripture. I was basically an apprentice holy man. I still am. I always will be. That's who I am. But why was I not encouraged in the right directions? And I've come to the conclusion that it's a sign of American culture. We don't have a well-developed culture, and one of the really tragic signs of our failed culture, I think it's failed. I consider it a total failure from my point of view. It was incapable of guiding me into manhood. All the wrong messages, all the wrong forms of encouragement, no guidance, no wisdom, stupidity, just blind stupidity. But this is supposed to be a happy station, not a pouting station, because you know Santa has a double column ledger for kids who pout. I still remember that. And finally, I looked up the word pout. It's basically what you would think it is, just yeah, that's pouting. All right. So, Quran, surah 56, is referenced in my teacher. I call him I have several teachers. There's a guy named Sheikh Hamza Yosef, who's one of the most amazing men I've ever even heard of. And he's been teaching me. And I read books by these Islam scholars back 1,000 years. Absolutely precious stuff. I have so much to read now. I will never run out of beneficial, enjoyable reading. And the subject I love most, because I discovered my family. My long-lost people. I've rejoined my people. Nothing can stop us from coming together now. I have full faith in Allah that He's shown me one of the greatest blessings a man can receive in his life. His true people. Well, why did my nation hide that from me? There's 2 billion of these people, and they've been around for over 1,200 years. Well established in more countries than you can name quickly. It's the most powerful religion of all time by far. Far exceeding the effects of Christianity. Islam is the only religion that's ever been, when you compare it with any other religion or all other religions. It's Islam. Was the destination. The Christians should all be Islam. We are. It's just that most Christians don't realize it. Well, I am one blessed Christian, because I've woken up to the fact that I'm Islam. That's way better. Because it's real. Christianity is a letdown. Christianity is a bummer. However you do it, there are exceptions, though. And you know that I'm just speaking from one side in order to make an emphatic point, that Islam is the right religion for a man. And I believe that you're not a complete Islam person until you are a Christian. But I think that that's the default. They all believe in Yeshua. And the only difference that just got locked into history, it was the confrontation between Muhammad and Catholicism that established forever the relationship between Christianity and Islam, which it's not against Christianity, it's against Catholicism, because Catholicism is so bad that it's impolite even to talk about that stupid religion. It's an absolutely deadly satanic religion that murdered millions of Christians. An evil, money-grubbing, purely satanic church that has murdered millions of people in the name of Christ. It's such a powerful entity that it's actually in the book of Revelation, that the Catholic Church is definitely part of the beast, which now basically would be identified with the United States. But you see the close association of false, deadly, actually satanic Christianity Satan pretending to be Christ, really. Pretending to be the Pope or a religion that, eats Christ's body through transubstantiation, that's pure superstition. And to say that Jesus is God, that person is probably going to burn in hell for that. You can't do that. You just violated your oath to Allah. You can't say that Jesus is God. You're out of your mind. Why, Jesus never said that. Why would Satan said it? So this is quite serious to me, and I'm sorry to burden you with this. If you just think this is something that you don't need to know about, I'll just tell you. You're pretty lucky to have me to listen to if you know nothing about Jesus Christ, the Bible, or God, and you pretend to yourself that you don't want to know any of that. You really need to grow up, and you need to do so quickly because there's not much time left to grow up. I don't care if you're 70 years old. This is a message from heaven. I don't talk down to people, but heaven definitely does, to get you up to where you need to be. It is a message of gladness, relief, joy, and freedom, right? I don't know why people associate religion with, death, torture, oppression. Nothing is innately wrong with anything. It's only that things get misused. And has religion been misused and abused? Well, the fucking Catholics, obviously. So it goes all the way from the very best to the very worst. Well, that's why Islam will never accept the Son of God the way it's been expressed to them. They don't know what I know. Oh, Jesus is definitely the Son of God, but you see, I don't like saying that anymore because it's almost guaranteed that an Islam person would hear that the wrong way. And in a way that I don't mean. And it's nobody's fault that this satanic subterfuge was introduced into the purest idea from heaven. That there is going to be one man who will be the head of humanity. That's not a partner with God. That's a designated head of state. Does God even have that right in Islam? Yes, and you better check with your imams if you have any. I just say that abstractly. I'm also talking to myself, because I had to go through this conversion process, and it could have been, I suppose, for most people, an ordeal. Like, should I accept this or not? And you don't have to pray about it and go to talk with people about it and have therapy about it and maybe drink yourself half to death over it before, oh God, I guess I can accept Islam. And then you just have problems forever afterward. Well, that's not a very good conversion. The most natural and normal conversion is you just suddenly wake up and you just start feeling better and better. But, it involves your moral nature. You're starting to feel gratitude and connectedness and love and mutual love and you just feel like you're ascending into more and more light and that you have more and more courage and everything's getting better. And you just start dropping bad habits and you start doing things better. And things just get better and then you're just more and more grateful. You're just filled with joy. You have more energy. You stay up. You see things that are just like brand new. Like you see the sun and the moon and the stars for the first time in your fucking life. And you start just appreciating everything you see. You just can't be happy enough, and then you're able to deal with problems better than ever. And all your agonies and inconsistencies just vanish before this increasing flood of orgasmic light. And this can happen at the age of 5. I don't know about deathbed conversions. I really mistrust those, but I'll bet I wouldn't doubt it. There's a case where this guy, you know what? I know I'm about to die, but before I do, I want to tell you kids, I see Jesus and He forgives me, and they say, then he's dead. Well, I don't know, but that would be kind of a good theme for something. This is the 56th surah of the Quran. It has the title, The Event. This is a medium-length surah, which I will not read in its entirety, but I wanted to direct your attention to a certain ayah, which is a verse, 5676, which I will read when we get to it. This is the introduction, and as most of the surah begin, this one begins with a basmala, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. When the event befalls, none shall deny its befalling, abasing, exalting. When the earth is shaken violently, and the mountains are pulverized to powder. It goes on in this vein for a while. This is a very common prophetic theme. Now we're getting down towards the verse to which we're referred, which is verse 76. Actually begins a little earlier. I'll begin reading at the start of this section, which sometimes is difficult to pick out. There is a parable given here. Have you considered the water that you drink? Have you considered the fire that you kindle? Is it you who brought into being the tree thereof? Or is it we who bring it into being? Speaking for Allah here. We made it a reminder and an enjoyment for the desert dwellers, speaking of the clouds, the water, and the fire which you kindle. These are the signs of Allah, by which he reveals his magnificence, really his name. So glorify the name of thy Lord the Magnificent. I swear by the places where the stars descend. This is the verse which can be translated differently. The word in Arabic, as closely as I can pronounce it, is Mawaqi, the falling places of the stars. This is a slightly different translation. To swear by the falling places of the stars, the Mawaqi. Here in this translation, which is the magnificent translation of Nasr, which you can get for free as a download, a magnificent book, which should be in every scholar's reading group, because this is truly a noble Quran. Truly it is a magnificent oath, if you but knew. Truly it is a noble Quran, in a book concealed. None touch it save those made pure. Revelation from the Lord of worlds. Well, it goes on in that vein in the praise of his name. So this is an extremely positive, uplifting message. And what is it again? Return glory to your Lord, he deserves it. Give thanks. Be grateful. That's really the message. The message of religion is to return love to the one who loved you first. I don't see how any man could object to that, even philosophically. There is nothing against doing that. It actually is quite profound to come to that awareness. It will and has changed a man's life over and over, millions of times. That a man wakes up to the fact that love came before him. He didn't invent love. He discovered love that already exists. That calls for a response. Love demands a response. It's the essence of moral decency, that you respond to kindness in like manner. As the love that you were shown, so show such love. For did it you good? Did it you good? It did do you good. Then do that. And so a man is converted to the way of heaven and obtains the image of heaven in his own life. It is, of course, through action. But action begins with thought. You must make the decision. That's Islam. is to make a rational decision. You're not coerced into your religion. You observe, through instruction, take a look at this, have you ever considered this? And eventually you see that it's the Creator that's doing all these things. Well, that's quite a moment in a man's life. Nobody should make fun of that. Nobody should have a philosophical objection to that. It is the essence of being human, that you wake up to the fact that somebody must have made you. I really don't see how anybody could object to that. Perhaps you disagree. I don't believe anyone made me. Well, okay. But why would you then say, I don't think anybody else should believe in such a thing either? That's irrational to say that. That has no actual source, unless you believe in evil influences, which the Islam people, including myself, do believe in. So you see, as you become aware of the fact that you are observed that way, you might develop quite a defensive attitude, that now you start to not like people who know God because you don't. That person is an atheist, and that person has made a decision against the revealed truth, that they don't want it. That is a problem, because you can't justify rejection of pure love. If you reject pure love, what does that make you? The reason I believe at this moment that I'm emphasizing this rather nasty side of human nature is that is the attitude that prevents the ears from hearing any further evidence, which is really tragic for everybody involved. Because now, whenever you're exposed to something that you should be grateful to have heard, such as what I'm reading you, you simply cannot accept it. So why should I tell you if I already know that there's no possibility of you understanding it? So here's what it is that's in this Holy Quran that I think is one of the most amazing things I've ever read in Holy Scripture anywhere, which is saying something. So be grateful and glorify the name of thy Lord the Magnificent. I swear, this is Muhammad on behalf, really, of the angel who represents Allah. So this is Allah who says this. I swear by the places where the stars descend, that is, the Mawaqi, the falling places of the stars. The commentary on this that I've read, which is from different sources, is in agreement by modern commentators that this is a reference to relativity. And I have read short tracts, that is, small treatises by very devout men of extreme learning and erudition, who comment on this, and they say the same thing. And they extrapolate. They say, this was discovered by Einstein. That when you look at a star, it's not actually there. It's in two places. In our prior video series, just preceding this video, I proved that to you geometrically in the collapse of the wave function. The collapse of the wave function and the Mawaqi, the falling places of the stars, refer to the same phenomenon of relative displacement due to time lag, such that when you look at a star, any star, it's not actually there at that moment, but rather the photons are reporting where they had been when they left their source. And that involves the quantum paradox of the collapse of the wave function for a photon, which we just solved. So I hope you appreciated that solution. I have a more extended solution where I give a 2-hour presentation on the collapse of the wave function, and I'll have a reference to that in the description. So I hope you enjoyed this brief reading from the Quran, where I just touched upon the nature of Islam, the Quran, and Muhammad. I have several recent video series on the Quran and on revealed religion, and what's most important for a scientist today, flood geology, which proves the Bible and Muhammad and all the Holy Scriptures now are aligned and coalesce into the one true religion, which has been around for 6,000 years and has never changed. Islam accredits it, Yeshua is the fulfillment of it, and everybody can now come to an agreement on the nature of the sonship of the Lamb of God. And that's what we'll be talking about next in our series on the Apocalypse, which arguably has just begun. Don't be alarmed. The whole reason for the revelation is to comfort your soul even during Armageddon, which will be an event nobody can predict exactly when, but now it's on the horizon. The destruction of Jerusalem and Israel. That's what Armageddon predicts. It's necessary now, and Israel has isolated itself, and the United States is now starting to cut its ties with Israel, which will be abandoned and will result to nuclear weaponry. And then it will be destroyed. Israel will be. That's Armageddon. Stay tuned. There's a lot of good information that you need to counteract Satan's successful plan on earth, which the Lord is giving him full scope to complete. That will be pretty bad. That's in the book of Revelation. We'll cover that next. Keep looking up. We'll be right back with more good news. Oh, there's a lot of good news. That's what we need. Not the news. We need the good news. That's from heaven. Anything from earth right now is going to be bad for you. Anything from heaven is what you need now. That's why I'm here. Welcome to Anagalactic. Stay tuned. Thank you. Good day to you. This is Anagalactic, our second presentation on this Saturday, and we just got done covering a surah from the Quran, number 56, which had the interesting verse in it that, according to commentators today, refers to Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. I just had to share that with you, but we're in a series on the collapse of the wave function, which comes up in context of the Quran. So that's quite an interesting juxtaposition or intersection or synchronicity. I'm not sure how to phrase that. But I like coincidences like that because I discovered the union of religion and science, which is a major discovery in a very long list of major discoveries to come out of my small institute of one and the lab cat who is currently prowling her territory outside. What you see on the screen up here may be familiar to you, or it may not. This is part of the duty of a presenter to be sure he's reaching the maximum intended audience, which in this case is anybody down to high school or conceivably younger. This is meant for everybody. Science is for everybody. Sometimes you need training in certain prerequisites in order to understand something, perhaps in mechanics or engineering, but in science, it's open to anybody at any age. You're just using your rational logical system in one of the ways it's intended to be used. Now, this is a very simple curve, which I would like to remind you is therefore related to another simple curve that we just saw, the equation of the function that defines the operator called multiplication. And there's a curve on a 2D graph that, if I draw this correctly, I have to do this reverse, but, well, I could just flash it up on the screen here. Let me see if I can get this for us just so you can see. There's another curve just like this, which we just studied. Very famous, which is xy equals 1 over 1. X times y equals 1 over 1. There's a curve for that. And we can take a quick glance at that. There's our sphere. There's our circle. There's another circle. Where's the one I want? There it is. So that's our very simple curve. This is a doubly asymptotic curve. And you know what doubly asymptotic, this goes to infinity vertically, and this goes to infinity symmetrically around the 1, 1 point. A very crucial point on the plane is the 1, 1 point. That is the lowest counting number in the number system that I discovered, and that is the number 1 proportion 1, which makes a perfect rate, which is represented as a circle. So this curve defining the operation called multiplication, this y equals 1 over x can be rewritten as x times y equals 1 over 1, and this red curve is that equation. So that's kind of magical. It's all balanced symmetrically on the 1, 1 point, whereby this curve, which is symmetrical to the vertical curve, they're conjugally symmetrical. They're at right angles to each other. And it reflects around the 1, 1 point. This goes to the x infinity asymptotically, so it never intersects the x-axis, but it's also not parallel to it. That's a paradox called Zeno's paradox. This does the same thing. It goes vertically. Those are two infinities that have a geometric relationship. I discovered that. So that's a major, major insight. What we'll be looking at now, once I get our corrected image, I think I'm getting close to it. Does that look like it? There it is. Okay. Technically, this has several names in modern parlance. What I would just like you to observe, it is very similar to the x times y equals 1 over 1 curve. This curve represents something different, but you do see that there are two perpendicular asymptotic infinities. Isn't that a curious coincidence? There are two conjugal infinities on this graph, just as there were on the x times y equals 1 over 1. That produces two conjugal asymptotic infinities. Isn't that fascinating? Didn't teach that to us in school. Well, it requires geometric insight, which there's a history to the loss of geometric insight, which is a symptom of the result we see today, which is a total breakdown and demolition of all science, which has halted, is paralyzed, and will never recover. So, although there's always a possibility, I believe we all know what that possibility is. It's never zero, because there is no such thing as zero, but it's impossibly remote. Now, this is actually a curve which doesn't show a mathematic relationship specifically, as the x times y equals 1 over 1, the basis of the binary system you just saw there, and day 2 of the surreal number creation sequence. All of this fits together, but what you're looking at here is basically a snapshot of something that was discovered 250 years ago by Ruđer Josip Bošković. And this is part of the Bošković force curve, but I'm the only one who knows that at this time. It could be deduced easily. It's rather obvious. It doesn't really require anything more than a glance with some knowledge behind the glance to see that this is part of the Bošković force curve. But this is not the Boschkovich force curve, which is a multiple curve. Extremely significant. But this is a single curve. In the same way that x times y equals 1 over 1 was a simple, gentle curve. And I did that wrong. Let me do that again. I think it goes this way, right? Oh, I'm dyslexic. So, I just did it right. No, I didn't. I did it wrongly. It goes like this, right? No, I'm still doing it wrongly. It's this way, yes. So it goes this way. And that's x times y equals 1 over 1. This is that same curve, but slightly twisted. And what you're seeing visually, it looks like a corkscrew, doesn't it? Think of it that way. That's exactly what it is. That is a corkscrew path through a very special space. The blue line is not in space, except it crosses the space line. And the only portrayal of space on this diagram, which I think you can now see, is this horizontal line. That is space. Nothing else is. So the blue line dips down here as it goes from right to left. And what you're seeing over here is a proton that is relativistically stationary, called its inertial reference frame. It's at, in this graph, it would be 0, 0. And that's the center of a proton. This blue line shows a force relationship between this proton at 0, 0 and another proton which is on the space line. So both protons are on the horizontal line because that's the only place on the diagram where space is represented. It's only represented on that horizontal line. Anything above the line represents one of two forces, and below the line is the opposite force. And these are attractive and repulsive force. And the key to seeing any diagram that ends in a vertical asymptote like this, which would be a diagram either of an electron-proton relation or a proton-proton relation, which this is proton-proton. But both relations, as the two particles get close to each other, ends in a repulsive force. So the inner curve, in this case, you see it here going vertically, that when it crosses the spaceline, it's now repulsive force. And what that means is if the proton that's approaching the inertial proton, which is at 0, 0, when it gets to here, there would be zero force between the two protons. So that's zero force between the two protons where the blue line crosses. And what that means is anywhere further away, you would have to look down here and see this part of the line to see the force, which below the line is attractive force. So right here is the end of attractive force going right to left. This is where attractive force ends and repulsive force begins, is at this position. That's a stable point. I call it an Eulerian point. In this projection, it represents the surface of a sphere, and it's a repulsive force field sphere. So that at this, you see, this is the closing distance as you see motion. This has to do a lot with motion. So as this proton is moving from right to left on a collision course, that's the whole idea, it's on a collision course, but everything effectively will depend on the velocity of the other proton. If it has no velocity, and you just, so to speak, turn on the diagram with, say, the proton right here, but with no velocity, you would be able to see what will happen next by reading the force relation, which in this case you'd have to read down. You go vertically down until you hit the blue line. And that's showing you a certain amount of attractive force, actually quite a bit. So if this were in freeze frame and then it were started with a proton at this position with no velocity, it would start moving toward the other proton by the force of attraction, which is not the normal charge relationship, as you know. The normal charge relationship between two protons is repulsive because they have the same charge, and same charge particles repel, as you are aware. So normally they repel. Why is this one being attracted at this range? It's because it's a different force than the Coulomb force, the charge force. This is the strong force. So that is within the range of the Coulomb force. It's a closer range force. So really this diagram is an isolani, which is a term I just basically invented for this usage. This is an inaccurate, from one perspective, this is an inaccurate diagram. This is from Wikipedia, and I'm not impugning Wikipedia here by saying they put in an inaccurate diagram. It was done in all innocence, and there is no crime here. But from my point of view, knowing what I know, which is a new insight into what this is a diagram of the strong force, which is distorted at the right end, because actually that curve that is showing it to be asymptotic with a spaceline. That's premature. It would not be asymptotic here, because that would show that the protons at infinite distance, that this is going to infinite distance, would have an attractive force, which is incorrect. So this is not an accurate diagram of the strong force. What it is a cutoff. And I call that an isolani because it's false. You've changed the meaning of physical reality because it meets your personal needs. That's not a sufficient reason to make a cutoff, because now this curve is wrong. That curve does not exist in nature. This part of the curve on the right side would actually not go asymptotic below the line on the attractive force. It would go above, back to repulsive force, which shows the boundary between the strong force and the electrostatic force, which are two quite separate and virtually opposite forces. But at close range, two particles always have this curve. This is also true for the inner range of an electron shell, which in a simplex hydrogen atom would be one electron, shows this curve also, which in this case the electron is attracted. But the proton at this range essentially behaves the same way as an electron. It's attracted, which is unnatural for the proton, but not at this range. When it gets close enough, the force relation inverts, which is quite interesting. So all of this is maybe more information than you wished for whatever it is I'm driving at. We are approaching the collapse of the wave function. And you may think, well, this does not really look like it applies since you're talking about two protons. Yes, but this is a force curve. And the collapse of the wave function, first of all, should not be called that. What it should be called would be, in this case, what I would suggest is instead of the collapse of the wave function, what you should say is a transition of state. There's no real collapse, and this diagram shows it. What this shows is the inversion of a force relation at a boundary, and it's a spherical boundary generated by the proton. And the boundary is affected by this proton. Now, all protons are alike, which is quite a profound and remarkable fact to state. All protons are identical. There is no variance at all between protons. They're identical, making them collectively a candidate for the quantum of gravity, which I've proved is exactly a correct statement. So that is the quantum of gravity, is a proton, because it makes a hole in space. It makes a hole in space. And that hole is essentially its force field. But its force field is the result of a harmonic generator. And it's based on the balance between two forces. Now, this is understood, but it's not routinely explored. And the only reason I'm opening up the same box but from a different direction to get a different perspective is I can see this from the point of view of spherical geometry now, which has an axiomatic basis superseding that of Euclid. So that's what I discovered. Is the superspace of Euclidean geometry is, and what I say next would depend on the dimensionality. But Euclidean space, the space that Euclid bequeathed to science, which is all science uses, is Euclidean geometry. For obvious reasons, it seems to work. So Euclidean geometry is, however, according to my discovery, which has been proved according to what I'm capable of demonstrating, Euclidean space is precisely, exactly the definition of a calculus derivative space. And that means that it's the derivative of a higher space, which would then be termed the integral space. And when you're talking about the plane, if you use Euclidean geometry, you have to square the plane. But if you use my geometry, which is, I'll just have to call it mine for now, it's simply the reparameterization of the plane with a single closed line that represents both vertical and horizontal on a rate. And that rate is 1 proportion 1. So what that means is you have a different way of mathematizing the plane so that you don't need to use add. You don't need to use, in fact, you don't use add. You only use proportionality. Addition is a derivative operator. It's the derivative operation of proportionality. And proportionality has an interesting twist to it. It's more complex than single componency because on the plane, instead of having two linear numbers to make the Pythagorean theorem the sum of two squares, instead of doing that, you multiply the x and y components together to get a rate. And that's done with x times y equals 1 over 1. And that can be manipulated to make the conjugal relationship x over 1 equals 1 over y, the definition of the reciprocal relationship, which in geometry is the orthogonal relationship, and that replaces linear polarity. So you no longer have a polaric geometric relationship between plus and minus. The plus and minus aspect, which represents the two, in linear it would be left and right, but in circular space it's in and out. And that's very simple and obvious. On a line, it's left and right, or right and left. Right would be positive, and left would be negative. If it's up and down, that's exactly the same thing, but orthogonal. So up and down are polaric. Left and right are polaric. And the third dimension of depth is polaric, with two linear infinities. For the plane, what is done is to make two lines and then conjugate them with the Pythagorean theorem by adding two squares and taking the inverse square. That is the Pythagorean theorem, which is foolishly named. It should be called the right angle law. It's the law of orthogonality approached from the linear formulaic direction, whereby you get this rather crazy sum of two squares resulting in a number from which you need to derive the inverse square, called taking the square root. That's a transcendental function. That's death. You can't do that. So that's a mistake. And the Pythagorean theorem is the finish line for modern physics. You have to get rid of the Pythagorean theorem. Einstein's field equation is based on the sum of four squares. That means you now have a hypercubic number from which you need to take the hypercubic root. That is such an extremely difficult calculus derivative to take that it's nonsensical to even consider it into the tool chest of proper mathematics. And so the calculus is a mistake. And the way Einstein used it is the worst thing that could have happened, is the sum of four squares. Because now you need to take the square root of a four-component product, or actually sum. You're physically adding four squares together. You mash them together to get a new area, which is somehow supposed to be a new square. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. You cannot take that square root. There's no rational operation by which you can take a square root. It can't be done. It's an illegal operation. So that's the end of the field equation. It has to be rewritten. I discovered how to do that. Now, why do I say that this shows the collapse of the wave function? It's because it's not a function, and it doesn't collapse. What is it then? It's a phase transition between two domains, and this graph shows that. This graph proves what I just said. So let me show you how this graph proves that. Even though the graph is technically incorrect, the two asymptotic infinities are in correct relationship. And I explained to you that this right side is deformed and false, and this is a stupidly drawn graph. And whoever drew it should be reprimanded. And Wikipedia should issue a formal apology and put my name in there. But someone else is going to have to submit that because I don't fight. Because I have an inferiority complex if you just want to dismiss it out of hand. But I am not going to challenge Wikipedia on their stupid depiction of the strong force. Absolutely misleading and ruins any chance for understanding. Because they think they can just cut this off. Because they're so proud of their goddamn fucked up result. So this is accurate in context. This is two conjugal infinities. These are two orthogonal infinities. They're not polaric. They're not plus minus on a line. They're opposite sides of a sphere. But the two sides of the sphere are not in and out. It's the approach to the surface and the transition into the surface, where the proton disappears into another dimension that cannot be seen nor measured. That's also what the electron does when it makes its closest it gets its closest proximity to a single proton. The simplest relationship in the universe is that between one electron and one proton. When the electron approaches the proton because it's being attracted, when it reaches the sphere, it changes into the sphere. And that's a change of domain. It's a change of dimension in spherical space. It's a right angle onto the surface of the receiving sphere, which is a Lagrangian point in spheric space. It's right here, where the blue line crosses the space line, the protons stop. And this one that is said to have the inertial velocity, whereas this one is relatively fixed. That's just a convention we always have to say, that this one is the only one that is conceived to have velocity. But if it's sitting here and it has no velocity, it will sit there forever. This is a stable point. However, there are two kinds of stable point in a two-body system. Lagrange discovered this, but Euler discovered 2 out of the 5 Lagrangian points. The James Webb Telescope is parked at Lagrangian point number 2. This is one of those Lagrangian points, but for microbodies, really quantum level particles. So when this is not an electron, it's a proton, but it does the same thing. It's attracted as it approaches. But when it reaches this spherical boundary, both forces go to 0. It's the tipping point between two continuously coordinated functions. And that was discovered by Boshkovich. So that's a half an hour for this. The collapse of the wave function is depicted this way. If this were a photon achieving the collapse, this is where the collapse is said to begin, is somewhere here. It's continuous, so it doesn't actually collapse. So that's the wrong word. And it's not a function, and a function doesn't collapse anyway. So the whole phrase is shitty. It's not the collapse of a wave function. This is what is meant by that, is the photon goes down like this. It's being absorbed into an electron shell. And when it reaches here, it can't go any farther, so it goes into orbit. It executes a right angle into a different dimension that we cannot measure. By definition, this goes down to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, but at relative macro scale. It's not exactly at the Planck limit. But this is essentially where one kind of motion changes into its conjugal motion, where it is an energic motion rather than a spatial motion. And that establishes an imaginary space for time, which is exactly where it needs to be. That is the space which should not be called time, but rather should be called energy, which is a composition of time and space in conjugal relation called light speed. This is the curve of light speed. This is the curve of the so-called collapse of the wave function. This is the curve of the quantum. And I will be explaining that further. I hope you're enticed. This is so profound. If it doesn't blow your mind, if you're not lost, you're probably not listening. You need to understand this well enough to be so baffled that you lose your mind. And then you must somehow come back from that. And every scientist has to do this when examining a discovery of this profundity, depth, and implication. This changes science forever. This is the greatest synthesis in science ever achieved by the mind of man. I hope I've tooted my horn sufficiently that you continue to listen before I die. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is Anagalactic, bringing you the secrets of the universe, the unification of science and religion, which is now available to every man under the blessed, heaven-blessed religion of Islam, which is pure Christianity the way I teach it. I'm the only man who teaches the pure religion now. You take your choice which one is more important for you, but I have all the answers. Do I get money? I would lose my soul if I did. Again, thank you for tuning in. Keep looking up. We'll be right back.